At this hearing, Mario and Anthony Miller stated all city employees will receive a 3% pay reduction. In the follow-up Q&A section, I pressed them. I asked them, is this real? And they said yes. And I pressed them again. I asked them, will they receive a 3% net pay reduction? And the answer was yes. Imagine my surprise when I read the budget proposal. In it, 90% of the city employees will have a net pay raise. What's going on here? Who is running the city? Is the city employees running the city? Is the union? Or are the taxpayers? I urge you to reconsider this budget. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Cavazos, the question was 90% of the employees are getting a raise.
Thank you, Mayor, members of City Council. We were very specific a year ago in April of 2010 when we talked about the $50.3 million at that time estimated what was going to be saved. We said specifically there were about 6,000 employees that were going to get a merit increase. That means the other 9,000 would not get a merit increase. The 6,000 employees who did get a step increase, again, this is a situation where we believe that a first-year firefighter should not be making the same amount of money as a 9-year firefighter or police officer. But even if they received a raise, their 5% would be netted by the 3.2, so they might get a 1.8% raise. For those individuals, very limited case. Every single employee that received longevity is getting paid less this year compared to last year. So every one of those employees, the other 9,000 employees, got a pay decrease. In addition, Mayor, members of the City Council, this management and executives got no increase. In fact, they took a pay cut last year, this year, and will not get a raise next year. So they'll get nothing for 3 years. Again, I want to emphasize that the city employees, based on a comment that was made, they have made great sacrifices. And we did break tradition. For the first time in city history, we had a decrease in pay, not an increase, a decrease in pay. There have been years where things were held constant, but this was the first year that the mayor and city council, working with labor, did get a pay decrease. And because of that, when you net it all out, the savings is $68 million, as explained by Mario Paniagua, compared to 2 years ago. So that's where we're at. It was actually citywide a pay decrease. We had a situation last year where we did obtain a vote. It was unanimous vote on the labor agreement. So all 9 council members voted for the labor agreements. When it came time to look at the pay plan, which has very specifics in terms of the steps, it was a majority vote of 8-1. However, we're in the second year where there's no increase in the pay plan, so the amounts are exactly the same, so there's no increase in those steps. I believe that there could be some bargaining issues, some bad negotiations, some unfair labor practices. Maybe Mr. Verber could expand on that.
Yes, Mayor, members of the council, and Councilman Maddox, these provisions, longevity specifically, is in every single memorandum of understanding we have with all the labor units that we've negotiated with. And several of the agreements also reference the merit pay. The negotiations, from my understanding, that did take place, I wasn't present, but from what I've been told, one of the items on the table that was discussed was the merit pay. And it was actually one of the items that was bargained for in good faith and reflected in the pay plan that was adopted by the City Council. So I do believe there's some contractual issues that would be implicated if those were not honored.
Well, could that conceivably, Mr. Verber, could that conceivably put us in an unfair labor practice and have the federal government intervening on our labor contracts?
The federal government would not intervene. We do have our own labor relations law. It may raise issues under that particular law with respect to good faith bargaining. I'm not prepared to give an opinion on that today, but certainly the issue is potentially there.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. That's it.
Councilman.
Mayor, I have a question for Mark Spencer, seeing that Claude took all my questions.
Mr. Spencer, do you mind coming forward, and due to your age, if you want to just sit there, that way you don't have to walk. Of course, not as old as Joe, right?
Mark, we heard a lot of testimonies about sacrifice that people are making sacrifices out there and that our employees aren't actually sacrificing at all. Are police officers having some type of pay sacrifice during the last 2 years?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Nowakowski, there have been quite a few reasonable statements made in this building today. Taxes aren't anybody's friend, and we understand that. And there are obligations and expectations. And certainly in Washington, D.C. last week, when we're reminded that line of duty deaths among police officers are up 40% this year. I mean, that's just, and I want to be careful not to trivialize this because we're dealing with human lives, but that's just an obvious factor that comes with public safety. It's very unusual, I think, nationally that here's the way it's supposed to happen. City manager, labor, fight. That's the way it's supposed to happen nationally. That doesn't happen here. That doesn't happen here because when reasonable minds get together, we understand that sometimes you have to say no. Sometimes less is more. And when you look at employee concessions, we've seen that consistently. We understood with our merit situation, it was important to protect those younger junior officers. You do have a lot invested in them, and we need to facilitate and continue to invest in their training. That was the agreement and the understanding. There were many things that we could have chosen, but we chose to protect those younger officers and those merit increases. Travis Murphy, killed in the line of duty, left a 2-year-old. He was in the merits. And, you know, there are inappropriate places to discuss things. Perhaps we shouldn't discuss merit and police pay at a police funeral. Perhaps we shouldn't discuss merit and police pay at a city council meeting. Perhaps the appropriate place for these discussions is at the contract table. And every 2 years we meet at the contract table and we come to agreements which we've agreed upon. You know, it's also reasonable, whether it's in public safety or the public sector or in, well, I'll call it the real world, private business. There's a concept out there known as keep your word. You know what? When you sign a contract, keep your word. There's a contract in place, and there seems to be a hesitation, unfortunately, being cultivated here of shying away or backing off the obligation of contractual issues that have been agreed upon. That officer right there, he's not afforded the luxury of hesitating. When he gets the call and he runs to the gunfight, he goes. And so when we enter contracts and contractual agreements, I think it's important to remember we don't get that obligation, nor should we. It's not reasonable to expect your police and fire to hesitate. It shouldn't be unreasonable also to adhere to contracts. I think public safety, specifically Phoenix police officers, have demonstrated that we're good partners. I think we're good partners. Let's see, City of Phoenix and Wisconsin. Did you see a difference in the labor interaction between those two states? It was night and day. We understand with both sides of the political aisle, both sides of the political spectrum, sometimes less is more. You have to take a step back sometimes to keep moving forward. There were agreements, there were concessions, there was a need for pension reform, and it was police and it was fire that stepped up to do that, unlike our the national unions that you see. That's the difference between Arizona and Wisconsin. They're dominated by national unions. We're local. We live here in the city of Phoenix. We pay attention to taxes. We pay attention to our water rates. We pay attention to the graffiti on the back of my wall in the alley. So we live here. We have partnered successfully with Citizens for Phoenix. I think there's a deep appreciation among Phoenix police officers of those who are vulnerable in our community, whether it be seniors, whether it be after-school care, whether it be the disabled. Time and time again, I think we've partnered. It's so easy to say, no, my guys first, me first. But that hasn't been the case. And I think that's been the pattern here, because when you get the community and your cops and the community and your firefighters together, you're going to see progress even in difficult times. And sometimes that progress means take a step back to keep moving forward. What else have we done? Twice, employees beyond police and fire have allowed the city to access their health care trust fund money, 2 times at $7 million a time.
What does that actually mean, Mark?
That is health care trust money. Here's a simple way to put it. That's our money. But you know what? Sometimes you have to take a step back. Sometimes you have to partner. There's times when Mr. Cavazos says no. There's times when he says yes, and the same is true here. And I think we have a history in the city of Phoenix of police labor and the city and fire labor and the city and the unions in general stepping up and taking that step backward. I think we've done that time and time again. Once again, I would have to... I really didn't have to come up here and say anything because Mr. Cavazos I think he's communicated very reasonably what the situation was, what was on the table, and what was out there. And I think we have an obligation to continue to move forward.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you. Before you move on, I just, and I know what you meant, but the vast majority of us have not had an intention of moving backwards on our word in terms of contracts, as you know.
And absolutely. And
Right.
when I say, Mr. Mayor, a step backwards, I mean that's called a concession. That's called reform. And I think when you look at police officers' snapshot of the picture today, only maybe 1/3 of our officers are in the merits.
Right.
Because we haven't been hiring. We have 500 vacancies. It'll soon be 600.
Right.
And
I just meant to say, you know, as Grandpa said, a deal's a deal, and you make a deal, you live by it.
And we didn't feel, and I don't think the council felt that it was an unreasonable deal. And so when you take furloughs and wage concessions, and you utilize that health care money, when you look at pension reform, when you look at even just out of their own pockets, our members are investing in St. Vincent de Paul, Rivers of Dreams, our Indian School Block Party, our community garden, our downtown inner city after day school. These are our members stepping up out of their pocket. Man, it's a privilege to represent and serve those guys. Time and time they step up again, and we're looking forward at continuing to move forward as we work through these difficult times.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mark.